Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well still, and welcome to today's bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into today's bonus, shall we? Today's first encounter. A little bit of background. I live in the California foothills. My parents and I moved into this house from the city in late 2017, after the house had been sitting empty for over a year. The day we moved in, my mom and I drove out first to clean up while my dad and my brother were driving the moving truck. Right off the bat, I was very uneasy, but I tried to write it off. The property felt heavy. It's the only way I can describe it. Some people describe the feeling of being watched inside their homes, but I had that feeling any time I stepped outside. We were going to sweep and mop the floors, dust the baseboards and windowsills when I started noticing this white granular powder all along the baseboard and the windowsills, the doorways. I immediately told my mother, who told me not to worry about it and sweep it up. By the time I had swept up every room and cleaned off the windowsills, I was certain it was salt, and a lot of it. But fine, whatever. The people who lived here before were superstitious. Okay, I can live with that. We unpacked the truck for over the next week. I was setting up my room when the next bizarre event happened. Knocking on my window. Also quick raps that sounded like someone knocking with their knuckles. It would happen so often on all the windows in the house. But when you would turn, no one would be there. You'd go outside, no one would be around the house. This only escalated. Mother and I would walk the dogs around the property. They were older, small dogs who were always good-natured and calm, except for when they were outside at this new house. They would growl, puff out, and get extremely agitated. They hated being outside. Then we started finding animal carcasses. They were always small creatures, rats, toads, bats. The biggest we ever found was a raccoon. The animals had been gutted. A single, deliberate line down their torso, starting at their chest and ending near their rear. No internal organs left. They looked practically mummified, like something had sucked the fluid and blood and organs right out of them. It was one of the most bizarre and brutal things I had ever seen. My brother would stay up late in his room on his computer every night. He liked to game with his friends until the early morning hours. He does not spook easily, but on more than one occasion, I would wake up to him shaking me awake, terrified, saying something massive on two legs was walking around outside his bedroom window, which he would have open at night. He said it would walk right up to his bedroom window and stop, and when he would take a look toward the sound, he could hear it scrambling away. I never saw it with my eyes, and he never did either, but the motion lights outside would be active every single time, leading to the woods near the back of our property. I know what you're probably thinking. All of this up to this point can be explained away rationally. A crazy person living in the woods, some neighbors messing with us for whatever reason. Well, that was what I told myself as well, so I could sleep a little easier at night. Then the banging started. It was so loud. It would sound like it was coming from everywhere at once. The walls would literally vibrate. Picture frames rattling right off the walls. It was like something massive, stronger than a crazy person, was pounding on the exterior walls of the house. Always late at night. And always in more places than just one. I could never pinpoint the source directly. My brother and I would stumble out of our bedrooms petrified. My mom would lead us to her room, where we would stay after that. My dad would walk the perimeter of the property with his gun, but never found anything. No footprints, no people, nothing. This happened for probably 6 months, and every time a major event would happen, my dad would walk the perimeter with his rifle and come back with nothing. We felt like we were going insane. Suddenly, it just stopped. The mutilated animals stopped appearing. I stopped feeling like I was being watched anytime I went outside. My dogs stopped being on edge anytime I took them out. And the property itself seemed to get lighter, like it finally took a deep breath after holding it so long. I genuinely have no explanation or even a clue as to what this creature, being, entity was. I'm just glad it seems to have moved on. Today's second encounter. This happened about a decade ago. I was homeschooled for most of my life, and it was very hard to keep track of time for me at this time, and years often had little distinction for me, with no reason to keep track of time outside of a young child's countdown to the most important holidays and birthdays. I didn't start registering what day of the week it was until I started public school at 15. But I do have clear memories of events I confirmed happened when I was 3, so I do feel I have a good recollection of this. I grew up on a farm that was sold by my grandmother over 5 years ago behind our backs to a farmer we rented our field to after we had been promised the 114 acres my family had been taking care of all my life. We didn't have much of a structure to our homeschooling, so it was often us doing things we could mark off as educational for the homeschooling evaluator at the end of the year, which meant we only had to give her a sample of physical homework, and this my mother rarely had us do until we needed them close to evaluation. I say all this to tell you just how much time I spent in these woods. It was my gym, and I could head out and play or walk the woods and stalk or chase whatever animal I came across all day if I felt like it. I was a stupid kid when it came to wild animals. I once tried to pet an animal I thought was a cat that I had cornered under our back porch steps. But looking back, I know it was a raccoon. Glad its hissing told me to stay away and not stick my hand under there to pet it. There were also coyotes in these woods, but my mom didn't believe us until she heard from a man she allowed to trap on the property a few years before we were forced to move. I was likely a small child to be alone in the woods, as I would see them lined up against the tree line as I cut through the fields, watching me sometimes. I swear there were 8 all watching me at once. I'd run towards those dogs, which thankfully simply scared them back into their burrows. But as I became older, I never saw those coyotes, which made me think they were likely looking for a snack. I did see a few animals that were off to me during my walks, and I recorded them in a notebook with other odd experiences sometime after this event. This notebook disappeared when I was 11 or so. The encounter itself, this happened in full daylight sometime in the early afternoon. I was shooting arrows at a haystack behind the barn. I wasn't with anyone. My dad was working in his shop. These weren't anything sharp, but they had still a good safety tip to them. I practiced so often at this time, I honestly wasn't that bad. But this was a handmade English longbow, made to my height, so they were quite easy for my child self to pull into position at my cheek. I have not found any modern bows to work as easily, but I didn't learn a lot about those, and never had done anything like it for a long time. I'd go back and forth retrieving my arrows, as I only had 3. If I completely missed the haystack with my spray-painted targets, these could go pretty far past it. We had a pasture off to the left connected to the barn and a large field all along my right. When the pasture ended, the field carried on for about twice the distance. The land was bridged together by woods that started after the pasture ended. So I just had the grass clearing far off into the distance where I would search for my painfully natural-looking arrows. As I was retrieving them, I noticed at the end of the far pasture, we had one fenced with wire but not usable, so that was just a chicken field. There was a large, sort of bulky, if not muscular-looking dog sitting somewhat oddly. I'm close enough to see its shape quite distinctly, but being fully black, there weren't a lot of details to make out. But I believe it may have had a dog-like snout. I was pretty convinced I was looking at a dog. My parents didn't have a dog, so, curious to see one on the property, I wanted to approach the animal and see if I could befriend it. This seemed perfectly natural at the time, probably sounds pretty natural still, but I suddenly thought that I didn't notice it until I looked up, and it was quite close to me, meaning it may have been sitting there watching me for a potentially long time. 10 or so feet from the corner of the outer fence, it stood beside what was a rather marshy, overgrown grass and green area. It sat there a minute as I began to get closer to it, and then pushed itself up, no longer sitting. I remember it looking much taller doing that, like the length of its arm/foreleg were hidden behind its black hair in the distance. I say arms because this thing started swinging itself in the grass on its knuckles, exactly like an ape. I saw it make maybe 3 of these motions, and it was gone. I'm unsure if this animal had a tail or not. I think its movements had disturbed me at the time, but for whatever reason, after walking all the way back to the barn, I simply told my dad that I had seen a dog. Today's third encounter. About 5 or 6 years ago, I used to live in a really small apartment in downtown. My place was on the bottom floor, halfway underground, on the rear corner of the building, and adjacent to the driveway that led to the building's parking lot and dumpster in the back. I got back home late one night at maybe 1 o'clock in the morning. My dogs had been alone for hours, so I took them on a short walk. It was a weeknight, so everything was dead quiet and no one was outside. As we were returning home, one of my dogs started acting weird. Not scared or particularly excited, but just completely fixated, like she had picked up a scent or something and wanted to check it out. She started pulling on the leash, which she never did. As we got closer to my building, she frantically pulled me and my other dog towards the driveway. We always went up the driveway after walks to dispose of their waste bags and enter the rear of the building where my apartment was. So I thought maybe she just wanted to get home for water or something. As soon as we got toward the driveway, she got in front of me to protect me and completely froze and stared. She was only about 40 pounds, but she was a half a guard dog and something made her alert and serious. I took her cue, looked down the driveway and saw something even blacker than the surrounding darkness. At first I thought I saw a small black dog or a raccoon, as some of the other neighbors had small dogs and we would occasionally get raccoons in our dumpster. After a few seconds, I realized it wasn't either of those things. The thing made eye contact with me and started walking toward us. As soon as it got next to the building is when I realized just how big it was, as it literally stood next to my apartment and window. This thing was easily 4 feet off the ground on all fours, and it kind of looked like something between a wolf and a bear. It was completely black, but it looked like the black was distorted, or out of place, almost like how a black hole is portrayed when it is absorbing light around it. It had a few gray squiggles in the black that moved erratically, and its eyes glowed gray with a small hint of red. It looked almost someone animated it, completely out of place in reality. When it got to the corner of the building, it stopped and stared at me, and my dog completely lost it. I'd seen the dog bark to protect me, bark at other dogs and cats, bark at the wild animals, but this was the only time I had ever seen her bark like that. She was howling, barking, and almost yodeling simultaneously. It was completely freaking out. My second dog was quiet and looked almost confused at first, just staring down the driveway. After a few seconds, it was like he finally noticed what my other dog was doing, and he started doing the same thing, except he sounded a lot more afraid. This next part still freaks me out when I think about it. I was frozen in shock, but the thing opened its mouth and showed some teeth with more distortion and gray squiggles coming in and out of its mouth. Its eyes glowed more than before, gray and red, almost like smoke. It let out this penetrating sound like a guttural growl, and my entire body felt like it went through me. I strangely felt like I was connected to it somehow, and that really scared me. It was staring at me like it was looking directly through me for a while. I'm not sure how long, and then it walked away from the driveway toward the back of the building and disappeared. I stood there dumbfounded for a couple of minutes, wondering just what had happened, and contemplating whether or not to go inside. The building was locked on both sides, but all of this took place literally right next to my window of my bedroom. After a few more minutes, it started to feel like it didn't happen. Still, there was no way I was walking down that driveway, so I went through the front of the building, threw the dog's waste baskets out in the laundry room, and went to my apartment. Locked the door, checked my gun next to my bed, and invited both my dogs to sleep on the bed with me. I couldn't sleep for hours, but my dog that tried to protect me passed out almost immediately. Her little heart was beating through her chest, and that was the only time I've ever seen her afraid. I've lived there 9 years, and nothing like that has happened before or since. For those of you wondering, I was completely sober, and no more sleep-deprived than usual. I knew all of my neighbors in the building, and only 2 of them had dogs, which were considerably smaller than mine, beagles and terriers. My dog's reaction tell me I wasn't completely imagining this. I'm a recent revert to Islam. Islam actually talks about things that exist which we cannot see, like jinn. And after my conversation a few months back, I started thinking a lot about what had happened and decided to share this. Today's 4th encounter. Hello everyone, my name is Achilles. I am 16 and I live in Terrorize, Greece. So please excuse me if my English is below decent. I like going on long rides with my bicycle. It is relatively new, so I don't have any problems with it, like the chain dislocating or anything. The last few times I went on a ride on my bike, I went to the small village of Pantokeratos that is conveniently near. So I decided to go there. At first, it seemed like a good idea, because the moment I went there, the seaside view was amazing. And it goes very nicely along with the fort there. After the fort and the park accompanying it, there is just a relatively big street full of small houses, with a small port for fishing boats. If you do go to the port, with an even more amazing view, there is a small forest full of olive trees near there. And by near, I mean right next to it. The forest is really small to be considered a forest, so let's call it a small cluster of trees. Even though it is small in range, it was full of darkness. It was pitch black under the trees, as if something was blocking sunlight from going through. The little clusters of olive trees were somewhere I both wanted and didn't want to go at the time, but I ended up not going because there was a fence. After going around the cluster of trees, I took a short, disappointed look at it because I wanted to see how cool it would be there. I immediately regretted it. I saw something move. I have myopia, 15 degrees to be specific, which is a lot, and because of that, I couldn't make out what it was that moved. I stopped my bike to take a closer look, and I saw a 4-legged thing. At first, I thought it was a wolf that was very close, but it was far away and much bigger than a wolf. I didn't get a good look of it, but it looked like 2 or 2.5 times my height. The worst part is when it turned around, it looked directly at me, as if it knew I was looking at it. That was the moment I determined it was not an oversized wolf. It had human eyes, human teeth, along with canine teeth, and a very long human nose. The lack of sunlight in the forest made it hard to see, so I may be wrong about some of the features. But its bright yellow glowing eyes is what scared me the most. It was like a ray of light was coming out of its eyes and being pointed directly at me. The moment it started to move, I realized I had a couple of seconds to look at it a bit more before I could start booking it with my bike. It stood on 2 legs instead of 4, and it started chasing me, moving like a human. That is when I got onto my bike and just went away as fast as I could. I didn't go to my hometown. I just wanted to get away fast, so without thinking, I went further into Pantokratos. But that turned out to be a bad idea, because I saw another cluster of trees, and that's when I saw the true horror of the village. A very tall and skinny thing just standing there. At first I thought it was a tree, but as I was moving with my bike I saw it had 2 legs. When all of this was happening, it was 8 p.m., so there was still a bit of sunlight. Though when I saw the skinny figure, I realized that the wolf thing was not chasing after me. It never left the tree clusters. So I thought the same thing would happen with the pole-looking thing. Oh, how wrong was I. Its legs were larger than I thought. They went up all the way to its head. It had no torso. And that's when I saw its arms. Its arms. They started off normally, but as I looked further down, its arms, they split multiple times, as if they were branches, but with fingers at the end. That moment was perfect for me to go as fast as I ever could on my bike and get straight home. As I am almost out of there, I took one last look at the thing. It had the same eyes as the other monster, bright glowing yellow eyes looking directly at me. I almost fell off my bike when the thing screamed. It was this very low frequency sound, but it went up gradually. I know it was the thing screaming because it opened its god-awful terrifying mouth. It was like its small skinny head that looked like a straight line expanded like rubber to look like a sphere. After going home that night, which was yesterday, I decided I'd never go to that village ever again. I've never told this experience to anyone because they would tell me to stop trying to scare them and to leave them alone. Today's final encounter. Hello everyone. On July 6th, 2021, at about 11:15, I was camping at our property in San Luis Valley. About 10:15, I caught something out of the corner of my eye, 3 feet to my left. As soon as I noticed it and looked up, it moved roughly 6 feet and went through a cattle fence as well as the wind fence, with no noise or footprints. I really didn't think anything of it, because I was by myself in the middle of nowhere, and your eyes can play tricks on you. Roughly 30 minutes later, I noticed the same thing on my left-hand side, still the same distance away. This time when I noticed it, it walked about 6 feet in front of me, and then took a right and traveled approximately 8 to 10 feet, and then traveled through the legs of a collapsible table, and then through the same cattle fence with wind fence on it. Once again, no footprints or noise. I got a good look at it this time. It was a black shadow, about the size of a 30 to 50 pound dog. I could see the shape of its right rear leg and how it mechanically moved. It had a dog-like tail and no visible face/eyes. The best I could describe it as smoky and transparent. I locked myself in my truck and sent some texts about it to my friends. The vibe I got from the creature was curious and non-threatening. If it wanted to do damage, it very easily could have at that time. I spent about 30 minutes in my truck and got out, ended up sleeping in the bed of my truck with the tailgate open. Clearly, I'm still alive. Super crazy, I've never experienced anything remotely close to it.
Well, there you have it, folks. Today's bonus. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Some just very terrifying experiences, and ones that really kind of make you think, wow, wherever I am at, these things are close by. So always be vigilant. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support that keeps the channel growing and going, and honestly what gives people a chance to share their experiences, a place to share it judgment free. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for answers, and God bless.